How far have you gone to have control or feel like you have control over your life? Aside from the to-do lists and the schedules, have you ever pushed your body past its limits? Have your relationships with other people been affected by your need for control? As we begin our journey into motherhood, even before conception, there's so little control that we have, and this can feel frightening, uneasy, and can even lead us to harming ourselves or our loved ones. For Josephine Atluri, her long journey into motherhood wreaked havoc on her ability to feel in control. Due to an illness that her husband had, she had to go straight into in vitro fertilization, which took years to get pregnant. And when she did get pregnant with twins, she then suffered a massive loss when she lost those twins. At that point, she and her husband decided to adopt, which is now her oldest child. After some time, she got pregnant again through IVF and successfully gave birth to girl-boy twins. She then decided to do 2 more rounds of IVF using a surrogate for another set of 2 twins, rounding out her total to 7 beautiful children. However, the road to get there was rocky, and she had little to no control. She went through so much stress to build her family that it led to an eating disorder. How did she make it through, and how in the world does she get through each day with 7 children? It was at her lowest point that she discovered that she needed something more. What was it that helped her get through and get out of that hole? Listen in to learn how Josephine changed her life and how you can change yours too on this episode of Mamas in Training. You're listening to the Mamas in Training podcast, giving aspiring and expecting mamas guidance and community from moms who have been there. I'm your host, Jessica Lorian, but I am not yet a mom. An autoimmune disease has delayed my journey into motherhood, so I've made it my mission while I heal myself to learn with you all about motherhood so that together we can be as prepared as possible. Now, you may not have the desire for 7 children, but even if one is perfect, there's still a sense of losing control that we might experience. So let's learn from Josephine just how to get a little bit of that control back and the impact that it can have on our lives and the lives of our children. Before we get to the episode, I want you to do one thing with me. Picture this. You're out for a day of errands with your baby when all of a sudden they've soaked their fresh diaper that you just put on them before you left. Okay, no worries. You have an extra diaper. Give them a quick change in the Target bathroom, but an hour later, you notice a familiar smell. Oh, gosh, time for another change. It's poop time. Yay! But you're a pro. You packed a second diaper, so you've got this one covered too. Baby is now asleep in the stroller, so you decide to go grab yourself a quick coffee. But then all of a sudden, they wake up screaming. So you pick them up, and what is on your hands? It's a blowout. There goes the third diaper, baby's clothes, and your own. With Boom Boom blowout bodysuits, diaper blowouts are covered. Literally. The entire back of each bodysuit contains waterproof PUL lining, polyurethane laminate fabric, which is used in cloth diapers. It is then bonded between 2 layers of super soft, unbleached organic cotton, making blowouts no longer a stress. Trust me, I saw it in action, and it's amazing how strong these Boom Boom blowout bodysuits are. They're made right here in the US, and the design is beautiful. Treat yourself to less stress and let Boom Boom Baby Company cover that mess by clicking the link in the show notes. And make sure to use the code MAMASPOD, that's MAMASPOD 25 for 25% off at checkout, because nobody has time for a blowout. Now that we got that covered, on to the show.
We adopted our first son, and then I gave birth to boy-girl twins. And so at this point, I had 3 kids, and I started training for a race. I was trying to get back into life after the pregnancy, and this is probably about 2 or so years after the pregnancy. Like, I had been working out, but then I decided, I need something just a little bit extra in order to really switch things around. And so I worked with a trainer. I set a goal of doing one of these outdoor mud races that I had never done before. And I get really hyper-focused on things. And so I got very hyper-focused on this before it was hyper-focused on winning at this infertility game. And this time it was trying to get in the best shape of my life so that I could excel in this race, a race that I've never done before. And I got in the best shape of my life, and I was so super strong. I never knew that I could be in this, be like that. And it was amazing. And so after the race, then I did a few other races, and I didn't realize that there's an off season and an on season. And so I was trying to hold on to this on season body and mentality and eating habit and lifestyle during an off season when I wasn't preparing for a race, when it was just like the holidays, and it was all of a sudden all the birthdays, like Thanksgiving, when we did have some people over, and I was like cleaning up, and like at the end of the night I would just, rather than put everything away, I would just eat everything and then feel horrible, and then like in the middle of the night throw up. And that's when all of a sudden, like, I had never had what I considered to be an eating disorder. I had body image issues ever since I was a teenager. And I think at that point that it just got exacerbated by this. And then it transformed into, all of a sudden, I found myself throwing up. I had no idea where this came from, but I just knew that I had to keep this physique. I had to keep this lifestyle that I had worked so hard for. And the only way that I knew how to manage it at this point was just throwing up. And this happened for probably about a few months. It's the fall seasons, or all the race seasons were over. And like September, October, November into Thanksgiving, and the holidays especially, I was throwing up. And I found myself like one night putting the kids to sleep, and I would lie there in bed with them, and I'd play music, because it was before like major social media where you could scroll through your phone, So I was playing music on my phone, and it was a Coldplay song, and I was trying to remember the name of it as you were sort of prepping me before this. But essentially, it's the gist of it is that this person is broken, and this person needs to like seek out help. It's just this really sad song that, for me, music has always been a huge part of my life. Like, I just relate certain emotions, certain experiences in my life to songs. That's how I kind of remember them. And so for this moment, it's that Coldplay song. But that was running through, and I was crying. And, I would like cry when I would throw up and all this stuff, because it's just a terrible experience to go through it. But it was in that moment when I was lying there with my kiddos and putting them to sleep, thinking that I had finally had this life that I had been wanting for so long, that I'd been fighting for. And now it felt like I was messing it up. Even though I was trying to control it, that was the funny part, is that I was trying to control this portion of my life by like maintaining it and keeping it the way I had wanted it to. But at the same time, I also felt like I was wrecking it, because of all those years of IVF, and then finally adoption. And then we also had like a second trimester loss of twins that moved us into adoption. To go through all of that, to just feel like this felt horrible.
Did you have anything run through your mind at that moment about what it would mean for your children?
That's a really great question. It was just more of like, what kind of mother was I to them, in terms of being authentic and true to myself, and all these things that I was trying to impart upon them as they were little. Not that they would recognize anything. Like, it'd be totally different if you asked me that question right now and I had the teenagers, now they're teenagers, and it'd be a totally different thing. Like, I wouldn't want this for them. I would want to model healthy choices and healthy habits and all these things. But back then it was more like, I want to be this truthful and just this really honest mother for them that is true to their story. And like, I don't want this to be my story. I don't want this to be this life that I'm leading that's just very secretive. It was just this whole other side of me. And it was easy to do it because we were living in New Hampshire at the time. So we were East Coast, right? And so I'm born and raised in Chicago. All of our family and friends at this point were in Chicago. And so it was like we were in a different world, which actually made it easier for going through that whole IVF process because I didn't have to deal with intrusive questions just over the phone, which point I could hang up. I was in a whole other world. It's like living in my head at this point.
So you were almost able, to like compartmentalize it into almost a different life.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned that the bulimia started due to this race coming up and, you were in shape, and then now it was after the race and you were trying to have this race body in normal life. Was it all about the race, or was it connected at all to your path of infertility, your in vitro journey, and everything that you had been through?
Yep. No, that's exactly it. But I didn't realize it at the time. And that didn't come out until I went through eating disorder recovery programs, and then further down as I was doing like meditation and mindfulness work and just self-healing and things like that. It didn't dawn on me that I thought this was all related to just controlling of my body and of the race, but it really was just lack of control in general of my life, and needing to finally be able to assert some sort of control over how things played out, because I didn't have any control when we were going through IVF and adoption, I felt like, and the loss and all those years where I was really at the mercy of science, of the agencies that we worked with, of the medical team. I felt like I was part of a medical experiment. And so this was what came to light. What I learned was that this was my way of finally trying to assert control over my life in a weird, messed up way. So 6 months into it, I remember having to confess it to my husband, which was horrible. I spent days, maybe even weeks, trying to figure out how am I going to bring this up to him. And he was totally taken aback by the whole thing. Like I had kept it hidden that well. So at that point, then we figured out that, luckily there was something local that I could do, a program. And so I did that up until we had to move down to, it's for a few months. Then we moved back down to the Boston area. And so I had to just continue with therapy down there. I don't want to say that it was like, it was a few months and then it was done. Because it was only a 6 months dabbling in bulimia. Even after like all this time, it's still a concern of mine, right? I liken it to any sort of like addiction. It's an addiction to food, an addiction to control. And so that is always in the back of my mind when, like for example, when the pandemic hit and I needed to control something. Right. I needed to figure out how am I going to control this insane situation that we were in, and like care for my family and myself and all this stuff. And there were moments when I would say, I wish I could just throw up, because that felt like something that I knew that I could do. And so it's just like this constant thing that is in the back of your mind. But awareness, that's where sort of meditation and mindfulness came in that, like that awareness helps me to make a decision or make a choice otherwise, versus sort of just constantly just sort of doing things on autopilot where it would just be, okay, well, that's my instinct, that's my reaction to the situation of needing to control my life in this new environment. And so that's what I'm going to do. Here, awareness gives you that gift of a pause. And so I had that little second or few seconds where I can check in and say, what is what is happening here? Why is it really that you need to, you had that thought, but let's dissect that real quick. Do you really need to do that? Or can we do something else? And why did that come up? Well, it came up because of this. And that all happens in your head in like a matter of seconds, but it's something that took many years, months of practicing, being aware of myself in order for that to happen.
Well, I first of all just want to thank you for your vulnerability and for opening up, because it's in these stories and it's in the vulnerability of other people who have been there that we get to learn and grow from, and hopefully find our path differently through. So thank you for being so open. I know it's not easy, but I really appreciate it. And I'm curious, of course, when you were going through adoption, when you were going through in vitro, when you were going through the surrogacy journey, when you became pregnant that second time, there was a lot you couldn't control. What was your feeling during that time? And did you do anything during that time? Or was it just like pushing on through, just keep going? How did you manage?
Yeah. So, great question. And that's exactly how I felt, because the explanation that we had from the previous loss was unexplained. And like, that's the worst thing that you can give to someone, because they can't fix it, right? We go back to that whole idea of fixing myself and like figuring out next steps. And there was no real explanation. So they did certain things, like they put me on modified bed rest. I had a surgery for closing up my cervix. And then that was pretty much what they could do for me, along with constant monitoring. But because of that, there's all this uncertainty and worry wrapped up. And so I basically just flat out described that pregnancy as that I hated it. I hated every moment of it, because I was living in fear of my body. Like, when would my body decide to just mess things up? Like, I couldn't trust my body. And that's a terrible feeling to have. And I wish I had meditation and mindfulness then. I didn't have any coping strategies. Before, my coping strategy has always been exercising. Couldn't do that. It was driving me nuts. And this was pre bulimia. So it's not like I even had like overeating as something that was like something that would comfort me. So I felt like a prisoner. And I didn't have a baby shower. I didn't take any baby pictures. I took one right before we went to the hospital, and that was it. And I was so glad once it was done. Like, the moment we had the C-section and I saw that they were okay and I was okay, I like finally let out this huge sigh of relief that I had been holding on to for like 9 months. And it was over. I was happy for that. I was happy to it was weird, because I was happy that the babies were safe and that we finally had twins that we actually gave birth to and that we had grown our family. But I was also happy that it was done. And that was not something that I talked about back then, because that felt so shameful to say, because everyone has all these expectations of pregnancy, that it's supposed to be this beautiful thing. You're supposed to enjoy it. You're supposed to be grateful for it and all this stuff. I was grateful that it was done and that I made it out alive, and so did the kiddos.
So many people think that, I believe, and they just aren't willing to say it. So just hearing you say it, I think, is a little bit of a relief for some people listening, I'm sure. If you could go back in time and have the tools that you have now, what would you say for someone who is going through a pregnancy? And of course, there's many things during our pregnancy that we can't control. But let's just give an example of, like, we're going into an appointment. So we walk into our appointment. We can control how we're going to prepare for that appointment. We can be even in a mindfulness place before we walk into that appointment. But then they start kind of spewing out all of this information. Maybe they're using language they don't know, and we start feeling a little overwhelmed. Oftentimes they talk quickly, all of these things. How do you recommend grounding yourself in real time? Like, in that appointment, what can you do? What can one do to get the most out of the appointment and not just kind of go into your head and zone out and think like, okay, I just missed all that information.
Right. Yeah. No, that's a wonderful question. And the thing that I just got finished talking about this, is that you can utilize a breathing technique. because that's the only thing you have at your disposal at that point, right? Especially if you're trying to understand the information that's being given to you by the doctor, whatever the medical team is, in that moment, you need to be present, but you need to calm yourself down. And the best way to do that is through using some form of breathing technique. So whether that's a square breath, which is 4 seconds, breathing, pause 4 seconds, exhaling for 4 seconds, pausing for 4 seconds, and going for as long as you need. That keeps you rooted to the present moment. It keeps you aware of your breath so that you're not instead spiraling in your thoughts. But it's something so quick, no, depending on how many times you do it, it can be under a minute. And you've already lowered your cortisol levels. You've brought yourself from an agitated state into a calmer frame of mind so that now you can respond instead of just reacting. You can come from a place of peace and more clarity in the situation. And that will help you not walk out of there feeling like you have no idea what just happened, which has happened to me so many times when I have this important conversation with a doctor and it's like they're telling me all this stuff like you just said, and I'm in my thoughts because the moment he says something, he or she says something, then all of a sudden I'm spiraling the situation to like, okay, what if this, what if that, and then this, and then I'm no longer in that room with that doctor. I'm in the future somewhere. Some catastrophic thing is happening.
Yes.
And then when I walk out and I have to tell my partner, like, what happened? I have no idea.
I don't know.
Notes.
It was bad, but I don't know. And would you recommend actually saying to the doctor, like, can I have a second? Or just while they're talking, go ahead and do this breathing?
I love that. Yeah. If you can just tell them, can I just have a moment to, like, gather myself? Yeah, please. So that I can really understand what it is you're trying to say to me. Or even asking them to repeat it. If you don't want to say that, you can just say, excuse me, but I didn't really understand what you're saying. Can you just repeat it again? So that, maybe at this point, maybe you can pull out a voice memo and have recorded.
That's a great idea. That's a great idea.
Rather than trying to write notes and not really being there and not listening, just pull that out so that it's there, asking for their consent to do so, and then breathing in this moment that they're about to re-explain themselves.
How did you actually get into this world of mindfulness and meditation and discovering that it would help you and ultimately heal you day to day?
I had a friend who kept recommending it to me, but much like many of the people that I encounter that I'm trying to sort of coerce into doing mindfulness and meditation, they say I can't do it. I'm constantly thinking about things, like I'm always making lists. I'm type A. I can't sit still. All these things. I can't quiet my mind. And that was totally me. That was like everything that I just said was me. But luckily, I had a very convincing friend, and we have the benefit of all these apps. So it's one thing to just have this idea where you're supposed to be sitting in silence and left to your own devices with absolutely no sort of
probably makes it worse.
of it and like next steps. So what am I supposed to do? But now we have the beauty of all these apps. And so the idea of, okay, just trying it for 1 minute. Let's just try for this for 1 minute and see what happens. And it was good for me because he was just guiding me to breathe. I thought I could do this. And then I tried it a few more times, just a couple minutes longer. And truthfully, it was finally a chance for me to really sit with myself. Like I had been going and going, like constantly with the kiddos. At this point, it was 3, was soon to be 5, very soon at this point. And I was constantly busy. Like I was always trying to do something. But this was finally a moment where I could just pause and take care of myself and just breathe and allow whatever to happen to happen. And it was beautiful because I had never really done that. And so I just kept doing it, and it became very, very beneficial for me. And then once we had the 5 kids, well, it went from 3 to 5. And at the same time, I started to work soon after they were born, and we moved and all this stuff. And it was like all the things that are high stress in your life. They say that these are the stressful moments in life. Buying a new house,
at the same time.
having kids, moving. I'm like, oh, okay,
new
we're
job.
just all doing them all together. That was my complete chaos moment. I just needed something else. And I could feel it. I could feel that like I was swirling and getting caught up into it and brought into it. And I knew that I needed to up it up a little bit, to increase my meditation, to dig a little deeper with it. And I signed up for this teacher training for work because I was trying to incorporate it into this fitness world that I was in. And I ended up not working for them anymore. And I ended up still being in this teacher training course. So I did it for myself. And I deep dived. It was amazing. So transformative. Noticeable changes in how I interacted with my children, how I interacted with life, with my spouse. And that's when I knew that I was just like, well, in general, I like to just hop into things anyway. And so I decided, okay, let's try this and let's see how I can like spread this beautiful message of inner calm and peace that's within your reach, just for a few minutes a day. And that's how I ended up starting to teach and eventually write books and all this stuff.
So what can we do? What is something that no matter what part of our journey, whether we are trying to conceive, whether we're currently pregnant, whether we're a new mom, whether we're adding our second, third, seventh, whatever baby, what can we do tactically to feel more grounded and actually have a little sense of control, if that's even possible in motherhood?
I like to say navigate instead of control, because I feel like control is such a like
negative
loaded
connotation.
word,
Yeah.
But yeah, there are definitely things that we can do, and it all stems from being aware of ourselves. Because I think I heard this on the radio, and I didn't realize it. I listen to the song all the time. It's this Jay-Z song, the one where he's apologizing to Beyonce. But apparently, he says in that song, "You can't heal what you don't reveal." And I never knew that was another. I've heard that song so many times, but it's so true. Because if you can't reveal to yourself, and that comes from awareness, like if you can't be aware of what's happening within you, well, how are you going to take the next steps in order to care for yourself, to nourish yourself, whether that's on your own, doing something for yourself, or if it's something greater that requires help from a family member, your partner, a therapist, your medical team, whatever it may be. You won't really know, and you won't really be willing to do it either if you're not tuned in. And so that's why I try to tell people that awareness isn't just like a one-off thing. It's not something you do once a day if you're able to do it. It's something that hopefully you'll be able to incorporate in your daily life. So you start off by being aware in this moment that you do every day for a minute or 5 minutes, whatever it is. And then it starts to trickle into an awareness of your interactions with other people. Like, how am I responding to them? What emotions are they coming at with me? And then in terms of other things that you do, like, am I operating on autopilot when I'm doing all this stuff? Do I remember what I did like 5 minutes ago? Can I mindfully eat? Can I like walk or exercise in a mindful way where I'm really witnessing what's happening in my body, witnessing what's happening around me? All these things can be made mindful. And the beauty of that is it all adds up to leading to greater awareness just for your overall life. And that just benefits you in all the different aspects of your life, and not just in that one session that you're doing. So it applies to being an aspiring parent. It applies to once you're trying to conceive and you're in the thick of it. And it applies to once you're pregnant and you finally have a child, or once you're adding more. Like, you can always apply this awareness to your new given situation. I want to give a tip of not attaching to your thoughts and knowing that you're going to have thoughts, because I think that's one thing that people have a problem with. They walk in believing that in order to do this, they need to clear their mind completely. And if they are not able to do that, then they're doing it wrong. And that's not the case, because we have thousands of thoughts happening in our mind every day. So the idea of shutting it off isn't realistic. And rather, it becomes this almost like a dance or conversation with your thoughts, where you acknowledge it without judgment, and then you can label it to just help you sort of detach from it. And then you can send it off, and you can even speak to it and say, okay, grocery list item, I will get back to you later, and I will get back to my breathing. And then you go back to your point of focus and know that it will just be a constant roller coaster. It'll just keep happening. But that's okay, because that's what happens in real life. So we're never doing something and are completely free of distractions. There are moments where we're doing work or we're engaging with our kids or whatever it is we're doing, and suddenly we get distracted by something, but we need to get back to what we're doing. So when you're practicing mindfulness, when you're practicing meditation, you are able to practice what you would do in real life, and your mind knows now how to handle it. So you acknowledge whatever that was, label it, detach from it, no judgment, send it on its way to get back to later, and then return back to what you're doing. And so you practice that in mindfulness and meditation, and you're doing it in real life. And so that's one thing that I wanted to make sure to talk about, was just that whole relationship to thoughts and what to do with them. And so in order to practice mindfulness, to your question, if you've never done it before, a great way to do it is to just try a breathing exercise. So perhaps you're sitting still, you're lying down, whatever feels good to you. If you want to close your eyes, you can. You certainly don't have to. And then you just take a deep breath in and count for how long you can take it. Maybe it's 4, 5, 6 seconds. And then when you exhale, see if you can make it just a few seconds longer and count it. And the beauty of that counting is that it brings you into the present moment. It roots you something. It gives you something to ground yourself to. And by doing so, really what you're doing is you're also becoming aware of how that breath is moving in your body. And also in the background is that breath is calming you down. It's bringing down your cortisol levels and all that stuff. So wherever you are, you can be seated, close your eyes, you can lie down, whatever feels good to you. And then on our inhale, we will breathe in for 4 seconds. So breathe in for 4, 3, 2, 1. And then hold your breath for 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then exhale for 6 seconds. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And now while I'm talking, you can repeat that process, breathing and counting on your own, at your own pace. It can be a little quicker if you want. But continue doing the 4, 5, 6. And especially when you exhale, see if you can release any stress that you might be feeling, any tension in your body. Attach it to that exhale and just blow it out of your body. Anything that doesn't serve you anymore in this moment, blow it out. Let it go, release it. You can stop or you can continue doing the 4, 5, 6, but that's another breathing technique that you can do anywhere.
I went ahead on your YouTube channel and I did your Empowering Your Fertility Journey meditation. And I thank you for that. And if anyone who's listening wants to have a challenge with this, which there's I shouldn't use the word challenge. I feel like that's negative.
It's a challenge.
It's a challenge.
That's what I had called it.
There you go. If you want a challenge to just get you kick-started in this, you can check out the 21-day meditation challenge that Josephine has up on her YouTube channel, and I'll link it down in the show notes. It was wonderful to go through, and I just think it's great when we're able to really spell it out simply. One thing that comes up for me, and I don't know if you've heard people say this before or if you experienced it in the beginning, is when you start a breathing technique like that, I do sense a little bit of like anxiety that comes up just in the holding of the breath, you know?
Yeah.
And I think it's working through that. As you move through it, it slowly starts to release. And I've even used that breathing technique when I'm anxious laying in bed and I need to sleep. And I do start counting and doing that, and it does help. So I think it can be used in so many different ways in your life. In the actual moment, in an appointment or something, or going to sleep, or just taking a second out of your day.
Yeah. No, I love that you brought it up for sleep, because a lot of times we get so amped up during our day and we're so wired that it's hard for many people to fall asleep, and without having to use other things. This is a way to sort of calm your body and ease into sleep gently. And I love that you brought up the fact that you felt anxious when you had to hold your breath, because it's true. A lot of people don't want to admit it, but yeah, it can be. It can be a little frightening because you're like, oh my God, I've never held my breath for this long. I'm pretty sure that you had to hold your breath for that long at some point. But it can produce anxiety. And so if you feel like that's the case, then you can try something different where it's a little less, it's shorter, and then you gradually build up. Or it can also be an exercise in trying to figure out, like, and being able to sit with that uncomfortability. Because, you know, that's kind of where you want to grow into this practice, is being able to sit with anything that comes up for you and be aware, like, why did this come up for me? Or where is this stemming from? And sort of digging deep for yourself.
This basic technique is a great place to start, because I think a lot of people hear, oh, meditate, just have more mindfulness, right? And we think it's either something so ethereal and on top of a mountain yoga-y that we, you know, disconnect from it. Or I've heard people explain it as kind of like a cop-out, like, oh yeah, just go ahead and meditate. But these things are truly life transforming, and they've changed your life.
Yeah. You're right. It can be so simple to say, just meditate and all this, and just do this and just do that. I hate the word just, or you should. But that's why my approach to all of this is just try to be as accessible and approachable and realistic as possible, especially as coming from a mom of 7 who works. It's just that, like, I need to find a way to give people a chance to give it a try, to see if they like it or not. Yeah. In the most welcoming way, people can give it a try.
I'd love for you to share your mindfulness book and journal for parenting, and then also your mindfulness journal for pregnancy.
Oh, yeah. So the newest one is the 5-minute mindfulness for pregnancy. And I wrote it because I realized after I wrote the first one, which is the mindfulness journal for parents, that wouldn't it be better if I could teach people before they became parents, before all the chaos began, and allowed them to have these tools sort of practiced and under their belt and in their toolkit before the baby comes, that you can do while you're pregnant and then hopefully carry with you into your new season of life of parenthood. And I always make a note of saying that it might not look the same. Whatever you have set up for yourself, ritualized and made it into habit, it might change. And that's okay, because your circumstances have changed. And so just giving yourself grace in that whole process and allowing yourself to be flexible to fit it in the way you're able to, it'll change, and allow it to flow with you.
I know flowing isn't something that we typically like doing. I know I don't. Controlling our time, our day, our tasks feels so much more satisfying, let's be honest. But this is a practice that we must adopt as we enter motherhood, and creating a habit like 5 minutes a day of breathing is a perfect way for us to start releasing some of that control. You know, we might not think that something like an eating disorder could come out of a need for control of our life in motherhood, but what a powerful story. It really shines a light on the importance of taking care of yourself above anything else. Like they say, make sure to put on your oxygen mask first. So Josephine taught us a powerful lesson today that can truly impact our lives. The power of a pause and a breath to ground ourselves. So whether we are trying to conceive, are suffering infertility, or we have 7 kids running around, we have to take that moment to connect to our body and release our need for control. And the best way to do that is simply to close our eyes and count our breath. I'm willing to bet that this season of life might feel like you're losing control. It might feel a little scary, or you might even feel like Josephine, broken. After the first step of breathing, the second step is to make sure that you have support, and that is where we come in. Join us in the free Facebook community, Mamas in Training, where you can connect today with other women who are experiencing the same feelings you are. All you have to do is click on the link in the show notes, and you'll have instant access to other women who are there to lift you up. This is not something you have to do alone. Remember, we're in this together. If you enjoyed the show today, new episodes release every Wednesday, so be sure to subscribe in your favorite podcast app so you don't miss an episode. And help us grow our mama community by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts. That way I know how to better serve you. And finally, I would love to connect on Instagram. You can find me at Mamas in Training Pod. That's MAMAS in Training POD. For Mamas in Training, I'm Jessica Lorian. We're in this together.